So the starting point was choir and orchestra and the idea of celebrating Earth. So I didn't want to write a rah-rah UBC piece. I wanted to write something which I thought would be a little more universal. And also pick a theme that I felt was pertinent to our time. So the piece really is a celebration of not only the centennial, but of Earth, and an attempt to to celebrate the environment and everything that's wonderful about our planet. So, getting back to your question, I tried to find texts which were universal geographically, but also related somehow to Canada, to BC, to Vancouver, to the university, and the influences on Vancouver especially. So I settled on, I picked out, first of all, texts that I really liked, and which I thought were representative somehow of the various influences on the city, and also that had to do with Earth. So I settled on the famous Latin, I forget now what it's called, and God created the earth, and let there be light, and all of that, and from Genesis. And I said this in Latin, so that's the first movement. The second movement is a poem written by a UBC poet, George McWhirter, and that was written especially for this work, and this really celebrates things like flowers and trees, and an environmentalist take on the earth. The third movement is by a British poet, Hawker, called The Butterfly. And the fourth movement begins with Asian Chinese instruments. I used an ancient Chinese text which has to do with waterfalls. And then the fifth movement is a combination of various languages, phrases which relate to water. It has a French title, Danse des Pluies. And the last movement is a wonderful poem by Walt Whitman, a fragment from a larger poem. So you can see these influences are some of the main influences in the province, like the Chinese influence, which is more recent, and the American influence. BC was settled initially by Americans back in the 1850s, and of course the British influence, and local influence of poets and other. The fifth movement really represents quite a few influences of French, Hungarian, Japanese, Chinese, German, Portuguese, Italian, Spanish. So I include all of these languages in that movement.
Oh, terrific. That certainly sounds tremendous. And the Whitman is very timing, as it's his 150th anniversary, I believe, with his publication of his Leaves of Grass, I believe. So,
I think you're probably right. I hadn't realized that, but that's interesting.
Very timely, yes. Now, just very briefly, the work that we're going to hear in just a few minutes here, Pender Harbor Suite, this is another piece that has something to do with British Columbia, is that right?
Yes, Pender Harbor is on the Sunshine Coast. I'm anxious to see your harbors in Newfoundland. I've seen pictures. I know you have some really beautiful harbors and villages and towns there, and I'm really anxious to do some sightseeing. Our coast is probably different, but we also have some pretty harbors, and Pender Harbor is one of them. And they have a summer chamber music festival, and so this piece was commissioned for an anniversary for that festival, and it was performed last summer by a piano trio that was in residence at the festival.
Wonderful.
And it deals with nature, not quite in the same way that Earth Songs does, but I was trying to capture, through the titles